This is a map illustrating parking lot density in Philadelphia across a short region. Now there are 1.6 million people living in the city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia has 2.2 million parking spots, which means it has more vehicle slots than people. If you've never had to deal with something like this before, you may not be able to grasp the severity of this issue. So as an example, let us compare Philadelphia to the city of Amsterdam in Europe. A city with a similar population but an entirely different perspective on urban planning today. While they do have a parking lot, they don't have an excessive number of spaces per person. Instead, they have one space for every 3 people. However, 40 of these parking places are really buried under the surface, freeing up space above surface for what is much more vital. To appreciate the values of sidewalks and bike lanes, all that is required is a little common sense. Consider a city or nation that is mostly dependent on automobiles and lacks bike lanes or walkways. You are purposefully excluding individuals who cannot afford a vehicle that costs thousands of dollars each year from society. Because people can't get to and from work, much alone the grocery store, in a safe and efficient manner, and because public transit is so bad, charts like this will emerge. The most popular mode of transportation in America, which just happens to be the car, which isn't surprising since America is designed for cars, not humans, and while there are some bike lanes in the US, they are either unprotected and extremely dangerous to use or simply end abruptly, leaving no other option but to walk or bike on the street itself. It's not ideal for sending your kids off to school alone or getting milk at the grocery. Aside from being literally housed until your parents return, it seems that in the United States, minors who are under the legal driving age but do not yet possess a driver's license are effectively placed under house arrest. The streets of Amsterdam, for example, are packed with people. Because the sidewalks are so safe to walk on, you never have to worry about being hit by a vehicle, and that's because they are really safe. The most wonderful thing about Amsterdam is that it is highly bike-friendly, with dedicated bike lanes that never finish up correctly and are instead meticulously laid out across the city to make it easier for people to travel. No car zones and even subterranean bike parking spots are available in Amsterdam, which seems to be somewhat insane. This is not something you'd expect to see in America, but just to prove your point, every major city in Europe has a bike-friendly atmosphere, even if you believe it's unfair to make the comparison to the United States. For example, Copenhagen or Paris. Not long ago, the major cities in the United States were constructed in the same way as those in Europe. Take Houston, for example, which now looks like this. These enormous parking lots have a lot of space devoted to them. It seems like this is how things have always been, yet this is not the truth. Because this is how Houston appeared in 1920, with a bit more pedestrian space. They could walk about their city without worrying for their safety or feeling as though they were invading the area of the vehicle. This indicates that the United States did not intend their cities to be this way, rather, they were bulldozed into being this way. Whereas European urban regions are gradually reversing the vehicle's dominance with high-speed trains, metros, and other non-automobile methods of travel. The United States is growing its dependency on automobiles by building roads and raising homes, apartment complexes, businesses, and schools to make room for them. That doesn't make any logic at all. I mean, there's an issue if a city increases the amount of traffic lanes from 16 and 20, and I have been trying to find out why they have done something like that and what really occurred. What I have discovered was strange to say the least. Start by looking at what I've got here. Cities such as Charlotte and Portland, Oregon. To put it another way, high school parking lot minimums have been imposed by many states as well as localities. This implies that a high school with corridors and an auditorium as well as bathrooms and gyms can be roughly 5,100 square feet in size. However, due to the parking lot minimums, when you have a school this large, you need a parking lot that is half as big as the school itself. That implies parking spaces and driving lanes must take up a total of 2,005 square feet. The fact that this isn't a choice in some places makes it all the more absurd, but when it's built into many school budgets, it only leads to overcrowded classrooms and an increased need on parents to provide their children with transportation to and from school. However, returning to the parking lots, this is just the outcome of city planners demanding roughly 3 to 8 car spaces per automobile in urban areas. When automobiles became more available to the ordinary American family in the 1930s, this practice began. However, prices were falling across Europe at the same time, and they didn't bother to create a place for them in their cities. So something weird is going on here, and experts are demanding an end to the large parking lot regulations, citing the precious area they consume and the total destruction of the urban environment as reasons. This isn't especially appealing, so what are the alternatives? Instead of rebuilding whole cities, how about the US just improves public transportation? Barely 5% of Americans now utilize public transit, and there's a very simple explanation for this. It's a disaster. This is a train that runs through Chicago. Its design makes it clear what it was meant to achieve. All of these diverse routes come together in the heart of Chicago City and then branch out. This is an excellent system for transporting passengers between the suburbs, the city's outer ring, and downtown. As a result, there is a total gap in routes connecting suburbs, rendering public transportation unusable for many individuals who rely on such connections. Transit systems in the United States were designed to cater to a certain sort of travel. Although surveys suggest that the most typical American commute is now from suburb to suburb, it is still from outside the city to within it. Lines that aren't generally served by public transportation in the United States and the rail routes that are available aren't very appealing. It is past time to discuss Amtrak. Amtrak has become a thorn in the side of the American rail system. Constant railway construction, greater government support, high ticket prices, and a lack of connection are all factors to consider. This implies that even if trains physically service a route that they might utilize, most Americans aren't keen on using them. Stations are also spread out, and key rail hubs such as Boston, Washington, and New Jersey haven't had an improvement in years. The system is little in comparison to Switzerland's model trains, which transports over 450 million people annually. By the way, it's 13 times the number of passengers every year that Amtrak carries, although Switzerland only has 8.5 million people compared to the US's 330 million. However, despite the fact that Amtrak has just been given $30 billion by Congress for a high-speed train, they have no intentions to utilize that money. Instead, they're investing all of that money on rebuilding 18 tracks between New York and New York City. Penn Station is being expanded and an old tunnel is being repaired. Essentially, they will invest government money in what has been proved to be successful while ignoring everything else. To be fair, only 25% of public transportation costs are covered by ticket sales, which means the other 75% must be funded by local, state, and federal governments. While this isn't ideal, instead of spending the money on more roadways, which would simply aggravate the situation, other options should be considered. As a first step, parking lots may be a good location to begin. Sure, large cities like Seattle, Detroit, and Austin will never be as congested as Zurich and Copenhagen, but the enormous expanses may be exploited in a mixed mashup of interstate connections and pedestrian alternatives. The United States may also take a lesson from Paris's book, which has been undergoing major infrastructure improvements in order to accommodate alternative forms of transportation over the last 3 decades. By 2024, Paris plans to reduce on-street parking spots by 72%, encouraging citizens to explore the city on foot, bicycle, or public transportation. When will the United States, in all honesty, be able to execute such a plan and fix its infrastructure issues? A solution is required, but what do you believe it will be?